Hello and welcome to Choices Global. In our first airing of Choices Global on February 13, 2022, we commenced a discussion on urban planning, framed in the five cycles of the appreciative inquiry model: define, discover, dream, design, and destiny. We left the conversation a dream, where the panelists discuss areas of development in our dear land, Guyana. Our panelists today are Dr. Wilbert Lee, MSM, retired colonel in the Guyana Defense Force, and who currently serves as an assistant pastor at First Assembly of God Church, Workmanville, Georgetown, Guyana. Mr. Kurt Corbin, a security project management and administration professional, and Mrs. Chevron Corbin, finance expert at a global financing institution based in Geneva. This husband and wife duo currently reside in Switzerland. Mr. David Hermanstein, a highly trained customs security and security professional with over 30 years experience and a community leader. And Mrs. Carissa Gooding, a civil engineer and the project manager of the Chedi Jagan International Airport Extension Project. Welcome, everyone. In today's episode, the panelists will continue to examine urban revitalization and embedding the rural and suburban into the urban, or should I say the urban into the rural and suburban. How will these strategies benefit our cities, and how can this be accomplished in Guyana, the Caribbean, and other developing nations around the world? And so, welcome to all our panelists. And this is how we will start off our discussion today. Looking at urban planning and how it has blossomed in various countries around the world, especially in developing countries, and more so bringing it home to Guyana. Because while we live in the diaspora, we do have a heart for our nation. And so, I want to invite Mrs. Gooding, Carissa, um, how, as a civil engineer, in based on your background, what is the biggest challenge in urban planning have you experienced at the moment? And then we'll start the discussion.
Hello, everyone. Moderator. Well, from the professional standpoint, the biggest challenge as it relates to urban planning, it's legislation. You have the issue of respect for spaces, your green spaces, reserves. Also, in terms of the interconnectivity of the different agencies, the government agencies, in terms of them working in synergy with each other. So those are the biggest challenges I would have noticed came across in terms of my profession dealing with urban planning in Guyana.
Carissa, and opening remarks from the Corbins, Siobhan, and Kurt, and David, and Dr. Lee. Siobhan, we'll start with the ladies today.
Oh, wonderful. Yes, the ladies are here. I think it's always a good opportunity when we can come together and have conversations that shape our communities. And so, reflecting on Carissa's own comment around enforcement, what it does is brings me to the experience we have living here in Geneva. And while it's a point we can build on later in the discussion, it's around recycling. And I do recall when we first came to Geneva, I looked at my husband happily separating paper and cardboard from plastic and so forth. And I just looked at him one day and said, Kurt, when we were living in Guyana, this would be so difficult because the mother who has four hungry pairs of eyes really is not in the mindset to sift through garbage. And so I want to just raise the fact that we recognize there's an economic limitation that we must and can overcome as a budding oil economy. And the second portion is around enforcement. Now, how is it that we have come to Geneva and immediately we have adapted to their culture?
Adapted.
But it is because there is some level of accountability in the community. And I must say that there are economic disincentives, if I may use the delicate word, where if you don't put the garbage sorted in the correct manner. There are ways for the authority to identify your garbage because you don't even realize the personal things you throw away, like a telephone bill or something like that. But there are ways of them identifying you and serving you with the requisite fine. So I'll stop there, but this is just one reflection as we continue the conversations.
Thank you, Siobhan. Dr. Lee, based on Carissa's response and stemming from Siobhan's, your comments, your opening comments.
Well, I I agree with Clarissa concerning regulations and how we adhere to them. Let me give you an example. For example, in the city of Georgetown, we are about 300 persons per square kilometers, um, whereas overall in the country, we are, I think, just about 3 persons per square mile. So we have a problem where we are crowded in the city. And so Clarissa did mention the issue concerning the regulatory bodies working, or there's some synergy between the regulatory bodies and also the government agency. The other issue is that I think also in terms of the housing development and housing drive, we have to ensure that we so plan in harmony with developers, we plan with those who require houses to ensure that we provide adequate spaces for some of the basic amenities that we need to have, what should I say, a happy life, a life that would allow us to fulfill the purposes for which we want to ensure happen in our country. So it goes back to the whole issue of regulation and ensure that those of us who live in cities, we ensure that we uphold those regulations, and if not, then measures should be taken to ensure that those regulations are kept.
Opening comments from Kurt and David.
Thank you, Salisha. Coming back to what Siobhan said earlier, I would like to delve a little bit more into that and give another perspective on I would call it sustainable development, and what do we want to do as a city? And the question I would ask is, what do we as a people want? Our leaders and the citizens, because it's a collaborative process. What do we want as leaders? You see, Siobhan mentioned we came and we adapted, but we adapted to a system that is in existence. It has been existing from since I can't say, but a very long time, and it's been working. And she gave an example of it being difficult in the Guyana context. Currently, yes, it would be difficult because of our culture, but I'd want to go a little bit further. This is where I would like to go. Um, we have a 5-year-old now, but he started school, I think, at 4 years old. And in that first year of school, that is nursery, he was already being taught about recycling. So for a mother or a parent with 4 children, let's go with a single parent. For a mother with 4 children, um, her of course at the beginning it will be difficult, but the children will grow. She wouldn't have, or she could have 4 children at the same age if they are all quadruplets. But as the children grow, they can help her with the recycling, because Samuel at 5, our son, he already knows how to recycle. He knows to not throw that type of garbage into that bin. So this is where the culture comes in. For me, for it to be sustainable, for us to move forward, we have to decide what we would like, what do we want to do, and then we have to be deliberate. Additionally, if that mother with that 4 children in our context, Guyana, or in a developing world context, wants to recycle, is anxious to recycle, is there a process? Is there a way? Is there an area where she can actually recycle? Is there someone who's going to collect that? Is it going to be recycled? So it is a collaborative process that we do need. And the first thing we need to ask is that question we asked last week in a appreciative inquiry. what is our plan? What designs do we have? We're not designers yet. What do we want to do? What do we want to be known for as a nation? And then we take it from there. So there must be a means for them, for persons to actually have a area or a place to recycle, and then we can continue this conversation. Solution.
Thank you, Kurt. And you've raised several issues, but we're going to go to David, and then we're going to come back to talking about these legislative issues.
Thank you, Celicia, and welcome, Carissa. It is an awesome start. I am in tune with you in terms of the regulatory bodies. That is a must. Regulations and enforcement. It's a must to put any serious program into perspective. Also, I want to inform that there must be a connection between agencies. In fact, there were efforts, and still is, where the government decided to have a single window for persons who want to do business. You can come to a single place and get all the necessary information instead of running helter skelter, for the want of a better word, all over the place trying to get information. And regulations are imperative, but regulations cannot be forced down the throats of new users. There must be some form of intelligence, some form of information. There must be a concerted effort to pass these regulations down to hardened people. So in the past, there was a program where Guyana has a leading role environmentally, and it was proposed that we should pass this program through schools. And to date, persons are learning, children are coming up with knowledge about the environment. And not only coming up with knowledge, children are winning hundreds of thousands of dollars right in Guyana because of essay they would have written on the environment and so on. So when we come to regulations, let us not be soft in passing the regulations or enforcing the regulations, but we must be cognizant that there are persons who were steep in the old ways, and we must find uh, good ways, and we must find ways of informing them that this is new, this is necessary, and we have to safeguard whatever we propose to safeguard. Thank you.
Thank you, David. I think that you've said quite a bit on the legislative. We must decide as the people, as the users of the community, the persons who live within the community. We must decide what is it that how we would like to see our community. And I think this is a critical component of our accepting regulations. Sometimes it's difficult, and we've seen and observed those who've been paying a close attention to Guyana. We've seen the fiasco of trying or attempting to implement a system without without proper um, without a proper intelligence, as David said. And that system fell apart. Was it a bad system? It wasn't. And I'm referring to the introduction of the parking meters of maybe 2 or 3 years ago. It's a good system, and it would have lessened congestion, it would have brought in an income, but maybe the way it was delivered and cause persons to push back. There will always be pushback. And as we talk about legislation, it's important as people, because the people vote, the people have a voice. And so while we expect legislation to be put in place, we want the voices of the city users. You're living in a city, your voice must be heard. And so it is imperative for community leaders to foster or to develop town halls where people can voice their opinions and dream as well for their city, because they have a stake. They're major stakeholders in that city. I'm gonna move to Dr. Lee. Dr. Lee, you as a retired Army officer and someone who has traveled around Guyana, you have seen the beauty of our country maybe firsthand more than any one of us here. What is your dream as a citizen of the city in Guyana, in Georgetown? What is your dream to see the urban or the rural embedded in the urban while preserving our green spaces?
Well, I have a very big dream to start off with, because given all that we have said before, given the way the city has expanded over the years, it is quite difficult to put some regulations in place now and bring to bear the order that we'd like. But as I would have traveled, um, first of all, Guyana has four natural regions, and 75% or more of us, we live on the narrow coastal strip. So we have 75% of our population occupying perhaps 15 to 20% of our land space. So a huge expanse of our land space remain underutilized. So my dream is that if we were to plan properly for urban development, superimposing the urban in the rural, I think it will give us a great opportunity to plan properly and to implement some of the measures that we would have spoken about earlier. For example, if we go to the hilly sand and clay belt region or the highland region, well, we have Carissa here. I think we the greatest expenditure has to be on infrastructure to make it accessible to people. But there again, we have sufficient land space that could accommodate persons in wide open spaces and at the same time work on sustainable development. So my dream is, well, it's possible that we can move or we can plan around establishing cities, establishing urban areas in the rural spaces because we have sufficient space. The second thing is that we are underpopulated in the sense, so where larger cities would have to concern themselves about where do they put their population. Ghana, we do not have such a problem because just about 700 plus thousand persons in 83,000 square miles. And if you were to spread us out, it would be less than three persons in a square mile. So we have sufficient space, we have sufficient landmass, and so we'll be able to implement those regulations that we talked about. So it is possible, but it just required planning and it required the necessary infrastructure to be put in place, and the dream can be realized.
Thank you, Dr. Lee.
If,
And that's quite true with the space that we have. Carissa, your comments.
Yes, as what Dr. Lee would have mentioned, in terms of embedding urban into the rural. First of all, I know the last episode that the panelists dived in a lot into dreams, but I'm going to touch on design. In terms of design, first of all, it begins with defining what the problem is. And as we all are aware, we know what the major problems that we're faced with in terms of our city, Georgetown. So it's defining the problem, and in that way, you tailor your design for the solution that is required. In terms of your overall objective of the solution that is required, what is it we want to offer the people, which is better quality of life. So for me, I would say in terms of designing, we look at what creating, moving from a model to the ideal model that you want. And you use this model now to embed the rural areas that you want and even your surround. So for example, quality of security, quality of your public transportation, quality of your infrastructure. We look at pavements, we look at the drainage systems, we look at the green space, community engagement, which is our playgrounds, parks. Even if we want to go to the extent of having museums developed or constructed within our city. But I want to focus on two: public security quality of our security, public transportation, and our infrastructure, looking at roads and drainage. So it's having a model and designing around what you want to achieve in terms of quality for the people. And once we're able to identify the problems and create that design for the problem, we will be able to implement. And the thing is, the problem that we have is to move from our design, move from our dreams to design to implementation. We have to start small. It costs a lot to invest into a city. And I believe that we have to start individually. We start with our surroundings, and that would influence and impact the persons who are responsible for legislations, as the moderator would have mentioned in terms of town council, town hall, because the people in the community, in your city, in your space, in your area, they have that dream of wanting a better quality around me in terms of my environment. So they start to do little. That is ensuring your internal drains are not clogged, in terms of your front of your carpet are kept clean. And that was trickled into the bigger surround, the biggest city of Georgetown. And that should drive now our policymakers and legislation to know when they look at infrastructure development, it will cater for the needs of the people to help to reduce congestion. So it's creating that synergy in terms of the quality. So the quality that you can get in Georgetown, I must be able to get that in Linden. I must be able to get that in New Amsterdam. I must be able to get that in the hinterlands. So it's first developing what is our ideal model that we want for the city of Georgetown, and then having that embedded now into the surrounding areas.
Thank you, Carissa. And I like the whole move from individual responsibility to then the community responsibility, because as you keep your surroundings clean, you keep your carpet clean, and your neighbor will see that, and it could cause a ripple effect on, and you see it, it's a human thing. You cut your grass today, the next day the neighbor cutting their grass. And so you have that chain reaction if everyone remains deliberate in keeping their place clean. Mr. Herman Stein, as a community transformational leader, how will you encourage, based on what Carissa just said, how will you encourage every Guyanese to be part of changing Guyana's tangible and intangible landscape, especially as Guyana is on the precipice of becoming a significant oil economy?
Responsibility. That is precisely what Carissa was talking about. Taking responsibility. But in addition to taking responsibility, there must be responsible leaders who will see what the people are doing and come aboard. Recently in Guyana, I cannot say Georgetown alone because our president has taken it elsewhere, where they were doing cleanup and they have rakes and so on, and they were cleaning at the surface. But I am aware that those drains that I played in years ago in the city, some 2 feet, some 4 feet, they are there and they are clogged up. Now you need fancy equipment to get those things really clean. You don't need guys going with a bucket and dip, and when they weary it, dip and throw it in a truck, and that messes up the whole city, the whole place stink. We cannot have that. We need a professional, coordinated effort to get to the bottom of things. So when you clean, you squeaky clean, you clean everything. I want to inform our viewers that I live in Atlanta, and one day you might pass, you see a sign up, something constructions, and you say, "Well, what are they building where?" Because where they intended to build is jungle. I said jungle, I mean jungle, bush, serious bush. And in 2 months, you will be surprised to see the transformation and the size of the building that is there. They have equipment, every little piece of equipment to do everything. They have equipment that will lift those trees. And then those equipment Another piece of equipment would strip those trees and sort them out, and that is something to sell. They have value added, and they would make that and put that for sale or sell it to some company, and then before you know it, you see pavement start to make and the streets that goes to the building, and it is amazing. So we have to return to basic and get our spaces sorted out, because if we improve on dirt, dirt will follow. So as a leader, I would like to not only to get the individual homeowners or property owners involved, but I would like to get to the bottom of the drains and clean as much as possible, because this is a big city now, and we need now to encourage people who are coming in to abide by the regulations, and that's the way we will move forward.
Thank you. And that takes me, as you say, to takes me to the Corbins on enforcement. Chevron started in her opening remarks to she mentioned a little about enforcement, but Kurt and Chevron, you're living in a diaspora and living in a developed country. Can you reimagine Guyana breaking into sustainable energy efficient living where every household, every Guyanese can be a recipient and a contributing member? And also share your ideas for enforcement in its maintenance based on your current, where you live currently.
Yes, Salisha, thank you for the question. But before I go there, I would like to just piggyback on what Carissa and David said earlier. Um, I like what was said. I do agree, and I would like to build on that. You see, Carissa spoke about synergy, about getting the citizen and then the community and then the legislators to all become involved. And David said the same thing. David echoed that and developed it. So, but um, you see, a one-off cleaning exercise or every now and again a quarterly cleaning exercise is not the ideal. The cleaning exercise or cleaning of the city has to be a consistent thing. It has to be a cultural thing. That's the word I want to use. Every one of us must understand what is our function and we must do that function before it becomes, as you say, coercive basis. We don't want to go to coercive. Coercive will be there, of course, when we have the defaulters, and we will have defaulters. But I am trying to encourage us to understand culture. You see, a leader may come out, in this case, the president recently came out and he tried to set the example. But that is one time for the year. Is the president going to come out again and do that? I don't know. I hope he doesn't have to. I hope everyone catches on and they follow his example and it becomes a habit. It becomes a culture, as Chris was trying to say. Each one of us take a responsibility and do what we have to do. So I would really like us to understand that it must be a synergy. So the citizen, the authorities, there must be a consistent cleaning process every Tuesday, every Monday, every 2 days, and the city provides that service, and the citizen as well. They collaborate with the city and they help. It must be a consistent basis. As it relates to my view on sustainable development, I would like to share on two. In the city that we're living in currently, Geneva, Switzerland, air pollution and noise pollution. Why air pollution? Every, I think during the winter period, yes, the 3 months from December to March, yes, more or less February month end, there's always a tester in the city to check the air quality. But during the winter period, somehow it gets all foggy, I guess because most persons drive rather than take the public transportation. So it becomes more foggy. So there are signs around the place that tell you what the air condition is, density is, and at what speed you should drive at. So at certain times of the year, the speed limit is reduced. Of course, it is shown on electronic signs. So you can't be doing 80 anymore or 100 anymore in a certain part of the city or on the highway because the fog is too much, the density in the air is too much. So I would like to see that we have better management of our air pollution, which we take for granted. Everything is all over our city. And the second one I would like to share about is our noise pollution. You know, a few years ago, our twin boys, they went back to Guyana, and our family, they were playing music, and the twin boys ran under our beds. When we were looking for them and asking what was wrong, the music was too loud. After I think 4 years of living here, yes, the music was too loud, 2 or 4 years. So there's a disconnect somewhere with our noise pollution level and the level, ideal level it should be at. So in just to be short, I would like to see those two things be attended to: air pollution and the noise pollution, and that will translate to a better quality of life as well.
Well, if I can connect to some of the comments from everyone. So, Lisha, when you ask us to reimagine our community in Guyana, I reimagine a deliberate economic policy and plan by our governments and our communities that will determine where economic activity is placed going forward. So it means that in villages such as my own village, Pleasance, or in Monrepo, or in Linden, or in many of the other outlying regions, when investors come, we should now deliberately put them in those new areas so that they create the economic
Corporate
resources
risk.
needed for a
Mhm.
community to have voluntary compliance or maintenance of their communities and green spaces, as Carissa and others would have mentioned. So this was why I made the example of the mother with the four pairs of hungry eyes, because once we've got an economic solution and resources, it's very easy for us to drive our own personal compliance in terms of taking care of our community. If I am to look at sustainable and energy efficient living, and using the example of recycling, again, I want to come with an economic solution. And Kurt asked the point, where would that person who wants to already recycle take their products? And again, if we had recycling plants safely and deliberately placed in communities or outside of communities, but they create an economic resource or an economic opportunity for our citizens, there again, you get buy in. And the third thing that I want to leave with us is around legacy. Kurt mentioned it when he spoke about our 5-year-old being taught from the school about recycling. David mentioned it when he spoke about essays being written by children out of competitions and encouraging them. And this is where our education system is important and powerful, and we all need to stand behind it, because if we start to inculcate these values of sustainability, of energy efficient models, of taking care of our environment, and celebrating green spaces. If we start in the school system with a 5-year-old like our Samuel, it means in another 20 years, we would have already shifted the mindset of a generation. And hopefully, myself and Dr. Lee and the rest of us panelists and our viewers would still be able to see a Guyana reimagined that has taken urban planning to the next level and gives the benefit for our nation and citizens.
Wow. Thank you very much, Siobhan, for closing us. We are out of time, but what resonated with me, and even as we bring this program to a close, is individual responsibility. We had an exciting time as we dream about changing the landscape in Guyana and the adaptable strategies for developing nations. I want to encourage all our viewers to think well of your city, to speak well of your city, and as your city prosper, you will prosper. And so I want to encourage you to keep in touch with us at faogw.org and our YouTube channel, Choices Global. Join us again on March 13th for our next episode of Choices Global. I am Celicia, encouraging you to remain safe. Have a great rest of your day. This is Choices Global. God bless you.